Okay, so this is going to be a demonstration of IMS 1.1, the Infrastructure Migration Service. Now, the Infrastructure Migration Service is based on CloudForms, and this is the CloudForms dashboard. It's what you see typically when you first log into CloudForms. The first thing that we're going to do here is take a look at VMware. So we're going to go to Compute Infrastructure Providers. And as you can see, we've got actually three different providers defined here. We've got OpenStack, Rev, and vSphere. The first thing that we're going to do, because this is a lab environment, is we are going to trigger a refresh of relationships and power states. And what this does is causes CloudForms to reach out to those providers and ask for the latest, most up-to-date information just to make sure everything is in sync before we get started. And then we're going to drill into vSphere. Now, as you can see, we've already got a little bit of information about vSphere because it's already been added to CloudForms and discovered. We have 4 virtual machines running here. Now, as of the last time that CloudForms pulled vSphere, it looks like all of these machines are powered on. You can tell by the green icon and the little quadrant icons here. And we have a database, 2 JBoss servers, and a load balancer that balances between the 2 JBoss servers. So what we're going to do is, now that we've got that as our source, we are going to go to Compute Migration, and we are going to create an infrastructure mapping. And this essentially tells CloudForms what part of vSphere is related to what part of the target infrastructure. So in this case, we're going to start with Red Hat Virtualization. It will default to that as long as you have a Rev provider in your CloudForms. We're going to name this VMware to Rev. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to map these clusters. So over on the VMware side, we have this boring DC01 cluster. But on the Rev side, we have this cool data center, and it's a trusted cluster. It makes it better. So we're going to map these two and create the mapping down here. Next, we're going to map storage. In a real world scenario, you're probably going to have quite a bit more complex storage here, but we just have the one storage domain that is a data store for VMs. So we're going to map those two together. Next, and the network is a little bit more complicated, so we're going to map the VMware or the VM network to the service network. We're going to map the management network to overt management. We're going to map the internal network also to service, and we're going to map the DMZ to the DMZ. And essentially the point of this network mapping is that we expect when you set up your VMware and your Rev target that Rev actually has access to the same networks that VMware does, so that when the VM is picked up and moved, it doesn't have to be re-IP'd, it just picks up and connects to the network with the same IP that it had before. So in an ideal world, what happens is the VM goes down and it comes back up, and none of the other components that touch it are any the wiser. So we're going to close that now that we have our mapping here. We're going to go to Compute Migration, and we're going to create a migration plan. So the first migration plan that we're going to create is going to be for migrating the database from VMware to Rev. So we'll select the VMware to Rev mapping that we just created, and we're going to call this I guess maximum length 24 characters. So let's give this a simple name. So migrate DB. And as you can see, you can choose from a list of discovered VMs. This is going to give you a GUI list, which is perfect for what we're doing because it's such a small scale. But if you're doing this on a large scale, the ability to import the VM list that's part of this plan is great. So right now, though, we're just going to go with the GUI. So this is going to show us all of the VMs that were discovered on the source side, and we're going to select the database and hit next. And here we have the advanced options, and this is mostly concerned with Ansible playbooks that you can run against the target machines. And you can do a pre-migration playbook which runs against the target machine while it's still on VMware. The post-migration playbook runs against the machine after it's already been moved to the target platform. Now, some of the things that you could do with this, for example, would be to remove VM tools because we're no longer going to need VM tools on the VM and install the equivalent agent for Rev. But there are all kinds of other scenarios that you may want to address with this. The uh, the process is optional though, and because this is a very simple migration we're just doing for demonstration purposes, we're not going to get into that. So the next thing is that we have the ability to schedule this for later. So if you save it to run later, you can set a schedule on it. If you start it immediately, obviously it just kicks off. We're going to start this one immediately, but in a more complex scenario, the scheduling kind of becomes essential because you're going to want to make sure that certain workloads move before other ones. For example, you may want to move your applications before you move your database. In this case, because it's a demo lab, we're not worried about moving things in a particular order. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off the database migration. So as soon as you hit that button, it actually does kick off the migration. So we're going to close this window, and this will refresh and start giving us status updates on what's going on here. If you've got multiple plans, each one of them will get its own tile here as it's in progress. And up here is the notification area where CloudForms will kind of explain to you in very brief terms what's going on in the background. So one of the things going on in the background is it's taking that mapping that we put together, and as you can see, it's talking about a conversion host here. And what the conversion host is a specially designated Rev host that has the necessary software, the Virt V2V software for handling the migration. So it also those VMware, I'm sorry, the Rev host will also have the appropriate software for talking directly to VMware to stream that disk from the VMware side over. So right here, this is going to give you a sort of a high-level view of the in-progress migration plan. So you click on this guy, it's going to come up. If there were multiple VMs here, you'd actually see each one of them. It would have its own progress section. And this gives you a little bit of status information about exactly what's going on. If you were terribly interested in it, there are logs that you can download, and you can also dig into the actual CloudForms logs to see what the state of the migration is. If we come up here to Red Hat Virtualization, this is the Rev side. If I can remember the password. So we can log in and actually watch the new VMs be created. So if we look at our cool data center, we can look at compute virtual machines. So right now we just have this rel 7.4, which I believe is a template. So it's going to be a little bit before that pops in there. And I'll probably pause the recording while we wait for this to continue. But in the meantime, while that's going on in the background, because we've got more than one type of migration that we want to perform, we're going to go to create another infrastructure mapping, and this time we're going to map VMware to OpenStack. So I'm going to come over here, because we already have one, we've got to search for it a little bit. So we're going to do VMware. And this time we're going to select OpenStack Platform as the provider. And we're going to pick cluster 01 as the source, and in this particular case, we're going to be moving to the target ticket monster, which is uh, that's the actual name of the application that's running on this demo lab. So we're going to add that mapping. We're going to map storage. So again, this is all pretty simple for demonstration purposes. I'm going to map the VM network to the service network, management to admin, internal to service, and DMZ to DMZ. So now in the background, we're creating a new mapping. So as you can see, it's right here. You can also have the option to edit them if you'd like. And so compute migration, and we want to look at migration plans. One thing I also wanted to point out is if you go into the detail on any one of these plans, you do have the option to select this guy, and this enables the cancel migration. So if for whatever reason you got started or it got started accidentally or unintentionally, you can actually back out and stop the migration from happening. You may have to go in and manually start the VM on the VMware side again if you want to revert back to it. I'm just going to check here and see if we've got the new VMs in yet. So clusters, trusted cluster, virtual machines. Hasn't created them yet. So we're still streaming the disks. And we're going to go to compute, migration, and actually we're already on migration plans. We're going to create a new migration plan. And this time we're going to migrate those JBoss servers. So we're going to select our OpenStack, and we're going to call this migrate JBoss. And again, we're just going to choose from the predefined list of virtual machines. Notice that because the database is already being in the process of being migrated, it has been eliminated as a candidate from this list. So I'm going to select both of these guys, hit next, next. So the instance properties gives you an option to make some modifications to the OpenStack flavor, for example, if you know that this needs to be targeted to a different size machine, for example, you can come in and change this flavor to large if necessary. We're going to leave it at medium for right now because I think that's probably sufficient. So hit next. Again, the ability to run playbooks against the VM while it's still on VMware and after it's been moved. And we're going to save this migration plan to run later and hit close. So right now we have this migration plan in progress. So we're going to click on this guy. And it looks like the data store has been migrated. So it looks like we've got all of our data over there. We can check on this. And as you can see, the database now exists as a virtual machine on the Red Hat Virtualization side. Yep, and we just got to see it. It's kicking it up. So it should be in the last stages here of the migration because we didn't have any post-migration automation or anything. It should just go. And while that's in progress, we want to make sure that everything kind of comes up. But we're going to click over on this migration plan not started. And we can choose to schedule this at a certain date and time. So this looks like it defaults to 1 minute from now. We alternatively could just hit migrate. I just want to kind of check on this and see if we can let this one finish before we start the next one. Actually, let's just live on the edge here. We're going to start off the migration of the JBoss server while the database is still being migrated. Everything's down anyway. Okay, it's been a little while since we paused the recording, and want to just kind of show some progress that's been made here. We've got one migration plan that's complete. That was our migrate to DB, or the migrate DB to Rev from VMware. So it says that it's successful. We can also kind of verify that if we take a look at the database in vSphere. The database has not been deleted. It has been shut down. We can see the IP address here, the 10.10.0.120. If we go over to the Rev side, we can see that the database server is up and running on the Rev side, and that it has the proper IP address. It hasn't changed. This also means that the tools are installed and running. And if we check on vSphere, we also notice that the JBoss 0 server is down, or that is because it is in progress of being migrated. So if we click on one migration plan in progress, we see the migrate JBoss plan. We can click on that guy to get a little bit more detail. And right now it's in the process of converting disks, and this could be a lengthy process. Okay, so we're back, and it looks like our migrate JBoss plan has finished. We were successful in migrating 2 VMs out of 2. It looks like it took 54 minutes and 7 seconds. We can go over to compute clouds instances to verify that. And as we can see here, we've got a JBoss 0 and a JBoss 1 instance now running under OpenStack. The green icons suggest that they're both powered on and still running. If we go back over to VMware, to vSphere, we see that the JBoss 0 and 1 VMs have been shut down, and they'll stay shut down until such time as we decide that we want to delete them, but they're no longer part of the application. But we started off with 4 VMs that were on VMware. The database has been migrated over to Rev and is running happily over there. The app servers, the JBoss 0 and JBoss 1, are now running on OpenStack, and we still have the load balancer running on VMware because we haven't migrated it yet. And if you were curious what all of this was backing, it's this sample ticket monster application. It's just a simple web app that's running on JBoss, and it's back-ended by that database. And we can prove that it's still running just by refreshing our browser here, letting it reload. And there you have it. That is infrastructure migration solution in a nutshell.